A common question that I get asked is, how do I motivate my team? Now I can get where that question comes from. You see, before you are formally promoted to lead others, you effectively are leading yourself. All you need to do is to focus on motivating yourself. And then suddenly, when you get that promotion, the question becomes, how do I motivate others? One thing that I want to share with you is this. Most employees working in an organization are motivated to do their jobs. If not, they're not going to have one at all. And so the more important question to ask is not so much, how do I motivate my team? But it is to ask ourselves, how do we tap into the motivation that is already there so that the work that needs to be done gets done? Also of equal importance, another question is, how do I sustain that motivation over the long run? And that's what we're going to cover in this video, starting right now. This video is based off Principle 18, understand motivation, manage expectations. Principle 18 is part of the 30 principles of first-time leadership. The 30 principles is that combination of traits that will help someone to understand what it takes to be a successful first-time leader. Like I said, there's a link in the description below. Just click on it. There are 3 factors that we need to consider in order to tap into and sustain that motivation for our team. Number 1 is to communicate with our team members. Number 2 is to understand motivations. And number 3 is to manage expectations. Number 1, communicate with your team member. If the question is that motivation already exists in your team members, then you need to ask yourself, how do I tap into that motivation so that the work that needs to be done gets done? The most intuitive answer would be to just ask, right? The reality though is that not every team member is going to open up to you and give you the answer. And in some cases, the team member might not even know what motivates them. Back in my corporate days, I showed a lot of interest in a particular area. That interest was oblivious to me. I didn't know until my manager had pointed it out. So it's really important that in order to try to establish this communication with your team member, you build that personal connection so that then eventually the team member will open up to you and let you know what is it that motivates them, or you'll be in a position to find out. Factor number 2, understand motivations. So once you have developed that personal connection with your team member and you understand their likes, their dislikes, strengths, weaknesses, aspirations, then you're in a position to understand what are their motivations. Some of the best indicators of when you have achieved an understanding of what motivates your team member is when you know why they come into work, what is their career aspirations. People are going to be motivated by a whole range of different reasons, right? Sometimes it will be extrinsic factors such as getting a pay rise, having a really nice job title. Other times it might be more intrinsic factors such as a strong interest and desire to progress in a particular field or in a particular industry, or just a desire to work with and meet interesting people. So your job is really to find out what is it that motivates them. It might not be one motivator, it might be a mixture, and the priority of these motivators might change based on the circumstances. So what you have to do is, once you got an understanding of what motivates your team members, then you need to be able to find the work that matches their skills and capability, as well as is going to motivate them. And then when you do, you will be able to then tap into the motivation. Factor number 3, manage expectations. Right up to now, we've talked about with a focus on how you can tap into the motivation of your team member. An equally important question is, how do you sustain it? You see, motivation is really fleeting. One moment is here, the next moment it's gone. And think of motivation as a fuel, right? Kept in a fuel tank. You don't want to use it up too quickly. You want to space it out, and you want to regularly replenish that fuel. So we know that all work that needs to be done in an organization is not equal. And when you work with a diverse team, you have different skills and capabilities, and it's about matching the right team member with the work that needs to be done, and also accounting for what motivates them. Managing expectations is about managing the expectation of the team member with regards to the reward that they can get by completing the work. You see, right up to this point, you would have already established that personal connections. And during that time, you have the opportunity to have a conversation with your team member about the work and how it is going. You then have the opportunity to sustain the motivation over a much longer run. So there are 3 sub-factors when it comes to managing expectations. And these 3 sub-factors are the amount of work that needs to be done, the time and effort involved, and the reward that is to be received for the work that is done. Let's talk about sub-factor 1, the amount of work. Is this work part of what the team member does, or is it on top of what they are currently doing? Is the work itself complex? Is the work itself complicated with a lot of moving parts? So we need to give this consideration, because now that you have got that personal connection with your team member and you know what are their career aspirations, you know what they are like. Do you have team members who feel that they want to take on the challenge of doing complicated work? Or perhaps you got team members who want something that's a bit more straightforward and clear-cut, so they may not enjoy work that has a lot of moving parts. You may have team members who are doing work because it's aligned to their career aspirations. So this is one consideration that you need to have. Sub-factor 2, time and effort involved. With the work that needs to be done, you need to give consideration into the time and effort that's going to be involved. If this is a complicated or complex piece of work that's going to require a lot of time and effort by a particular team member, is it wise to give it to that team member if it's not part of their career aspirations or they're not motivated to take it on? And that's why it's really important to have that personal connection, to understand the strengths and weaknesses, the skills and capabilities of your team member, so that you can assign the work to the relevant team member and also take into consideration their motivation. Perhaps a team member will be happy to take on work that is complicated, work that is complex, because it's part of their career aspirations. And so their reward might be just being able to learn and grow. This leads us to sub-factor 3, the expected rewards. And expected rewards can range from an official promotion, money, to a letter of commendation, a recommendation, or even just being able to put down the achievement in one's resume. It's really important to understand with the team member and make sure the team member is aware that with this amount of work and amount of time and effort that they have to put in, that's the kind of reward that they can expect. Nothing is going to burn up motivation sooner than a team member with an unrealistic expectation of the reward that they could get. One thing that I'll add is that, especially when it comes to longer pieces of work that require more time over weeks or months, it's important to have a regular check-in with the team members who are involved, because they may be satisfied right at the very beginning with the expected reward that they can get. But as they put in the time and effort to tackle that amount of work, they might find that, hey, look, this is something that is not really worth it, and that will burn up motivation really quickly as well. I will close off this segment about the 3 sub-factors with this point here. It's a constant balance of these 3 sub-factors of the amount of work, the time and effort involved, and the expected reward. Your job is to continuously balance these 3 factors. That the amount of work that they have to do and the amount of effort and time that they have to be involved in, that they're happy and satisfied with the expected reward. And so all throughout the period in which you and that team member is getting the work done, you have to constantly balance their expectation. If you enjoyed this video, you got value out of it, really appreciate it if you hit that like button, helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're watching this video for the first time and you have not subscribed to us, do subscribe. It not only helps us to grow the channel, you will also be notified when new videos come out to help you with your first-time leadership journey. So in this video, we talked about 3 factors on how you can tap into the motivation of your team member, and also sustain that motivation over the long run. The first factor that we talked about is to communicate with your team member. Build that personal connection with them so that you understand, you know what motivates them in their work. With the second factor, understand motivation, one of your job as the first-time leader is to understand what motivates each of your team members. And that's where having that personal connection, that personal relationship works for you. Because when you understand what motivates each team member, then you can align the work that needs to be done with their motivations. With the third factor, we talked about managing expectations. And under managing expectations, there are actually 3 subfactors. Subfactor number 1, which is the amount of work that needs to be done. Subfactor number 2, time and effort involved. Subfactor number 3, expected reward. And when it comes to managing expectations as a whole, you need to be able to balance these 3 subfactors in order to sustain the motivation of your team member over the long run. So hopefully you now have a much better understanding of how to motivate your team, how to tap into the motivation that already exists in your team members. Remember that motivation is fleeting. It comes and it goes. An equally important part of this equation of not just tapping into the motivation, but also sustaining it over the long run. In any case, my name is Daniel Lee. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I look forward to seeing you soon.